The jungle never sleeps. In the middle of the night, somewhere in the mountains of Vietnam, an American fire base lies like a bright spot in an endless sea of darkness, surrounded by black vegetation, surrounded by enemies. The men believe they are safe. 3 layers of barbed wire, minefields, machine guns. For weeks, hardly any enemy contact. The handover to South Vietnamese forces is approaching. Some are sleeping, others are smoking one last cigarette. No one notices the shadows moving slowly through the jungle. 50 men with knives. With satchel charges, they cut silently through the wire. They stop 20 meters from the bunkers, waiting for the signal. Then the first mortar rounds tear the night apart, and in that moment, a fortified position turns into a death trap. The Vietnam War was not a war with clear front lines. There was no front and no rear. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once. American warfare in Vietnam relied on air mobility. Helicopters inserted infantry deep into hostile territory, pulled units out again, then sent them back in. But those troops needed fire support at any moment, and air support alone was not enough. Aircraft were weather-dependent. Helicopters could be shot down, and many missions required immediate, precise artillery fire around the clock. That is how the concept of fire support bases emerged. Small, isolated fortresses deep inside enemy territory. Artillery positions protected by infantry, outposts meant to project power into the jungle. At the same time, these outposts created a deceptive logic of progress. Each new fire base looked like another nail driven into the enemy's ground, a visible sign that the Americans were digging in. On staff maps, white spaces filled with blue symbols. But those maps showed no fear, no exhaustion, no men lying in bunkers night after night, listening for sounds that might never come or might explode right beside them. Presence suggested control, reality was tension, and the longer a firebase existed, the more it became a psychological target for both sides. On maps, these bases looked like points of control in a foreign space. In reality, they were psychological markers for both sides. For Americans, they meant presence. For the enemy, they were invitation and provocation at the same time. Every base that was built challenged the enemy. We are here. We are staying. That very signal turned these positions into magnets for attack, because every fire base was visible. Everyone transmitted radio traffic. Everyone fired. And everyone announced, "Americans are here. This place is worth attacking." The longer a base existed, the more the enemy learned its weaknesses. Shift changes, blind spots, poorly secured sections. What was meant to control the battle space became a fixed point in a war that punished fixed points. The construction of a fire base began with destruction. The jungle was flattened by bulldozers. Vegetation burned with napalm. Explosives tore clearings into the ground, not out of tactical elegance, but out of fear. Fear of cover. Fear of unseen enemies. Around the position, a barren zone emerged. Clear fields of fire. No bush, no tree behind which someone could hide. But the farther the jungle was pushed back, the clearer the real problem became. The enemy did not need to be close to be deadly. Artillery and mortars could reach the base from far away. At the center, the guns. 105mm and 155mm howitzers. Dug in, reinforced with sandbags, crudely covered overhead. Around them, infantry bunkers, machine gun nests, trench lines, 3 rings of barbed wire. Between them, mines, tripwires with flares. With every new row of sandbags, the sense of safety grew, and with it, dependence on these primitive walls. The men began to cling to the structures they had built. The bunker became home, the trench, a familiar path. But that familiarity was dangerous. Routine kills awareness. The longer a base stood, the more normal the emergency became. Distant shots turned into background noise. Incoming rounds into something you grew used to, and anyone who grows used to danger misses the moment it moves closer than ever before. Yet every defense had the same problem. It was static. The soldiers knew every bend of their trench, every bunker, every sandbag edge. The enemy learned them too. He studied patterns, reaction times, routines. Fire bases were not fortresses. They were islands, isolated, dependent on helicopters. Bad weather meant no resupply. A shelled landing zone meant no evacuation. If the enemy encircled the base, you were trapped. The men knew this. Every night, Every shot from the jungle, every movement in the undergrowth reminded them, out here, no one is on your side. The longer a firebase existed, the more secure it felt, and the more inevitable the moment became when it would be tested. Most attacks came at night. First, mortars, rounds landing inside the base, explosions among tents, shrapnel in sleeping bags, then silence. And out of the silence, the sappers, small NVA assault teams, trained for infiltration, armed with wire cutters, satchel charges, knives. Their goal was not open combat. Their goal was chaos. They moved where the defense believed itself safe. Between positions, behind bunkers, in the shadows of their own fortification. They threw charges into bunkers, set ammunition dumps on fire, killed soldiers in their sleep. Sometimes gun crews never even managed to traverse their howitzers. The enemy was already inside the positions. In moments like these, Americans resorted to desperate measures. Direct fire with artillery, shells bursting in the air barely 100 meters from their own lines, close enough to tear the enemy apart, close enough to endanger their own men. One mistake, and friendly shrapnel killed the defenders. Over the radio, men screamed for support while no one knew exactly where the enemy was. In the darkness, every shadow was a possible attacker, and above it all hung another threat: enemy artillery. Soviet guns with greater range than American pieces. They shelled fire bases from distances beyond effective counter-battery fire. Hits on landing zones, hits on ammunition dumps. One lucky round could turn an entire base into a burning inferno within seconds. Many bases held, many were abandoned, and some were overrun. Firebase Mary Ann, March 1971. 231 men. Hardly any enemy contact in the weeks before. The handover of the base was approaching. Routine had set in. Guards knew their patterns. Danger felt distant. Alertness dropped. Watchers grew careless. Positions were not consistently manned. A fatal condition in a war that never paused. At 2:30 a.m., about 50 NVA sappers approached. They cut through 3 layers of wire, undetected. No tripwire set off an alarm. No flare lit the darkness. 20 meters from the bunkers, they waited for the signal. Then the mortars opened fire. Explosions tore men from their sleep. Before anyone could react, the sappers were inside the base. Satchel charges flew into command posts. Bunkers burned. White phosphorus ignited. Command staff were killed in the opening minutes. The artillery could barely fire. Many gun crews fought for their lives in their own positions. Units lost radio contact. Orders stopped coming through. Small groups fought in isolation. Survivors later said they could hardly tell where the enemy began, and their own lines ended that night. The attack dissolved the familiar structure of the base. Bunkers that had promised protection in the evening were burned out ruins by morning. Paths you could walk blind in the dark led straight into fire. For many men, this night changed the character of the war. No longer distant, no longer controllable, but immediate, within arm's reach. By morning, the base was devastated. 33 dead, 83 wounded. The attackers were gone. What remained was a position that showed how quickly safety becomes an illusion. Fire bases were meant to bring control. They were meant to create security. They were meant to make the war manageable. They often did the opposite. They tied soldiers to fixed points in a war that demanded movement. They turned men into targets in terrain that belonged to the attacker, and they created a deceptive sense of protection deep inside hostile jungle. For many soldiers, the fire base did not become a safe haven. It became the place where the war suddenly entered their tent, their bunkers, their sleep, and sometimes it came silently.